We're moving into the next section, the calendar of events. And in this part, we're going to have three interesting things to build. First of all, we've got this header, which is also responsive type, similar to what we have here. However, here we have something interesting. We have a headline that the first line is aligning to the left side and the second line is aligning to the right side. So that's going to be interesting to create. Then we've got this filtering system. Now, previously in the intermediate model, we've basically created fake filtering by using the tabs element, but here we've got two reasons why we can't actually use tabs. Number one, the list is actually dynamic, right? The list is pulling from the CMS collection of the sport types. So reason number one why we can't technically use a tabs element. And the second thing, we want to be able to multi-select multiple categories. So we're going to have to use a checkbox element instead of the tabs. So we're going to do that. And then we have the actual grid of events, and we're going to use a grid for that as well. So let's get started. I'm continuing from the build, and feel free to clone where I am right now. I'm heading into the page wrapper where I have all of my section, and I'm adding a new section that I'm going to call, let's call this calendar section. All right, what do we have in this calendar section? First of all, I'm going to create a div to hold all of this first header. So let's call this calendar header. So let's bring in a div and give that a div a class, which I'm going to call calendar heading. Okay, what do we have here? So first of all, we've got the typography. And then we've got kind of like an image overlay that has also this blend mode, which we're going to create this parallax effect as we're scrolling. And we've got this arrow just hanging at the top right corner. And by the fact that it's hanging at the top right corner, I already can tell that this is going to be an absolute element because we want to position it relative to its parent at the top right corner. So let's start with actually the typography. Now, the easy way to do this is by, if I just have two elements, right, then I can have the first element aligning to the left and the second element aligning to the right. However, for SEO purposes, I want this to be a single heading, a single H2 heading, so that Google know that this is the heading of the section. This is a good practice. So inside of this calendar heading, I'm just going to add an H2, and this H2, let's call it calendar of events, all right? Calendar of events. I can go ahead and break the lines a little bit just so that I have two lines of text here. And let's go ahead and give this a custom style because we don't have any class to use for that. So let's call this calendar heading. And let's start to style it. I'm going to start off with the color. I'm going to make it green. I'm going to go ahead and give this an uppercase, and I'm going to, using the variation, give this 775 to make it bold and condensed. That is great. Now we need to start thinking very similar to what we had here, trying to make this a responsive type. So again, I'm going to use viewport width, and let me try, I think 20 viewport width. Let's see how that looks. Obviously, I need to use this as well, viewport width, to set the line heights and make them quite close to each other. That is okay. I wonder if this looks good. Number one, I want to condense the letters, so I'm going to do the letter spacing. It's kind of similar to what I've done in the members section. Now, I'm trying to think this calendar. The word calendar, the first line, is about, I would say, 75% or 2/3 of, the section. So I think it can be a little bit bigger. Something like this, maybe 23 or 24. Let's keep it at 24. And let's increase the height. And both of them are relative to, my viewport width. So if the screen is bigger, they're going to be responding to the screen side. Okay, so I think this is good. So far, we are good. Now the question is, oh, by the way, we want to give this whole section, of course, a black background, a little bit of padding from the top and bottom. Forgot to do that, so we can see the video in the background. So let's go to the calendar section. Let's give that a black background. And I wonder why we see this here in between. We'll figure this out in a second. Okay. Maybe this was just a bug. Let's add padding 70 from top and bottom. Okay. Guess this was just a bug. Okay. How are we going to tackle the alignment? Okay. So the way I'm going to do this is I want to treat this whole heading as a flex box, because if this was a flex, then I could align the first, and then I want to break these two things into two elements, element number 1 and element number 2, so that one of them I can align to the left and one to the right. Let me show you how we're going to do this. I'm going to select this text and wrap it in a span, and I'm going to call this calendar heading line 1. Okay, and then I'm going to select the second one and give that a span and call this calendar heading line 2. Now you can see that I actually have this H2 actually became kind of like a wrapper that holds two elements. The first element, calendar heading number 1, and then heading number 2. Now the reason this is great is because the other alternative that I had was just to bring in kind of like two H2 elements and then have this as line 1 and the other one as line 2. However, if I would build it this way, it might look the same. I can achieve the look I want, but Google would find this very confusing because they would think that these two are two separate headings. This would confuse the SEO. And so in this way, Google sees this as a single heading, but I actually have two elements to work with inside. So what I want to do is now change this calendar H2, which is actually the wrapper. Let's change the display setting here to flex. And it's trying to organize them horizontally, so one next to each other. No, I want them to be set vertically. Now we have too much gap between them, and I think this is probably because we've created a huge line height here. Maybe actually the line height is coming here from the calendar heading. Okay, so I can actually reduce this. Now I have two elements, and then the line height is being multiplied. So that's not what I want. I think this 8 or 8.3, this looks good. Okay. So now let's see what we have. We have a calendar heading that is aligning them currently vertically. And then what I can do is I can pick the second line, and you can see here that as a flex child, I can override some of the alignment. So by default, I guess it doesn't set the alignment, but I can go ahead and align it to the right. And that's great. Now I have the first one aligning to the left. And the second one aligning to the right. So I overrode the alignment of the actual Flexbox. Let's see what would happen if I change, my screen size. That's fantastic. Okay, so the logic here was to have basically two elements within a Flexbox. First one is aligning to the left. It's actually not aligning to the left. It's stretching. But let's say it was aligning to the left. This one is aligning to the left. The second one has an overriding of alignment to the right. So that's fantastic. And that gave us pretty much the look that we wanted here. So that is great. What do we need next? We want to have this water thing. And by the way, the calendar heading, because I can see that we've tightened up the line height so much, you can see that the actual bounding box is smaller than the actual text. So let me add a little bit of padding just so that we have, I guess, the right spacing. Fantastic. Okay, so now we have actually two elements that are going on top. So absolute element. Let's start with the splash of water, and they are both relative to the parent element. So let's go ahead and do that. We have the parent element in this case is the calendar heading. This one. Actually, I want this to have a little bit more padding this way. And so maybe we can remove the calendar section. And the reason that I'm doing this, let's remove it, is because they're going to be, the image and the arrow are going to be relative to this one, to calendar heading. So I wanted it to be a little bit bigger. And now let's turn the calendar heading into a relative element so that it can be relative to the absolute elements inside of it. And let's bring in the splash of water. Let's take it from here. Water splash. Let's bring it in. Okay, so by default, it's just an image after the text. Let's call this calendar heading image and turn that into an absolute that is aligning to the top of the element. Now we can't see it, so we need to change because now it's on top of it, and we want to change the blend mode to something that we can see. So let's change the blend mode to, I think it's exclusion, exactly. Okay, so that's exactly the look that we want for this image. That's great. After we'll have the whole section, we'll also add kind of like animation as we're scrolling. But to start with, this looks pretty good. I want to bring in the arrow as well. So let me copy that as an SVG. Also paste it inside the calendar heading. Confirm the size. We'll see if the size is... Well, actually, let's rename this. I can see it here. And this is icon embedded. Let's rename this calendar heading arrow. And make sure that this is white, actually, not gray. And let's turn that into an absolute as well and pin it to the top right corner. And we don't want this to be too, like, exactly. We do want to have a little bit of space at the top and at the right side. Let's give this a little bit of percentage-based spacing here. And we can try this and see if this looks good as we're scaling. Yeah, I do want, as I'm scaling, I want the arrow to be smaller as well. So I'm going to change the size of it also to be viewport width. Not sure what to do, so let's do viewport width 3, too small. Increase it by I to something, yeah, that looks pretty good. And so now we still have the height fixed as REM, so let's do that. Also 13 viewport width. Okay, so now the size of this icon, as we're making this smaller, it becomes smaller. It's actually not becoming small enough, I would say. Maybe we'll try to do this percentage based. Let's try 15%. Let's see what that does, 15%. No, let's remove the height. Let's just try to use the width to force the size. And let's try 12%. Now let's see. This is still not becoming small enough for me. Let's set the width again, 13 viewport width or 12. Okay. Not sure I'm happy about this, but we're going to tackle the responsiveness of the whole website at the end. So I'm going to leave the details of responsiveness to the end. Just want to see. Okay. So this, I'm feeling good about the header section for now. Just want to make sure this a little bit is kind of like aligned to the top line of the text here. Okay. And we're ready to continue and build the second section, which is not second section, but second part of this section, which is the filtering. So let's think about the structure of what we have here. First of all, we basically have two elements, right? We have a text element, which says, show me. And then we have basically a collection list, which is a single item. And so we're going to need a wrapper to put both of them together. And then we'll need a text element, and we'll need, which is probably an H3. I think this is a H3 text. Let's check out. No, this is actually an H2. Okay. So this is going to be, but actually this is an H2 from an SEO perspective. So I'm just going to use an H3 for this, but I'm going to give it the H2 class. And then, so I need a wrapper to hold both of them together. I have the text element, and then I have the collection list, and they need to be one next to each other horizontally. So we're going to organize them in a Flexbox. Let's go ahead and start doing this. So in the calendar section, not in the calendar heading, let's add another div for this, and we'll call this div, let's call this calendar filtering wrapper. Okay. calendar. I do have a typo here. Calendar, just to make sure I can find it if I need to later on. Okay, so the two elements I need, I'm going to add an H3. So that's one thing that I have here. And then the second thing I need to add here is a collection list. And the collection list is going to bring in from sport types. That's what I need. Okay, so we've got the sport types here. Okay, heading is going to be show me. Let's do that. Show me. Okay. Show me. And let's give this a class of H2. Fantastic. It looks great. And now the calendar filtering wrapper, let's turn that into a flexbox. Let's make sure that they are being organized horizontally. And let's give them a little bit of a gap between them. And let's see how that looks. Okay, so we've got that. And they're currently left aligned. But let's see how now we need to reorganize the collection items here. So let's go to the collection items. Let's call this filters calendar filter list. Let's turn that into a flexbox so that they are stacked horizontally. Okay, now we've got something better. And let's think, what do we have inside here? So as I've mentioned, this cannot be a button or a tab or something like this. This needs to be a form element, a checkbox, which we can tap on or off. So in order to be able to put a checkbox inside of this element, we actually need to put this whole collection list inside of a form element. So let's go ahead and actually bring in a form block. Let's put it here. And inside, let's see what we have in the form block. We have the actual form success message, error message. We don't need success or error in this case. Inside of the form, we have text fields and submit button. I'm actually going to delete all of them right now. All I need is the form block and the actual form. And I'm going to put the collection list inside of the form. Okay, fantastic. Now, inside of the actual item, I want to bring in a checkbox. Now, you can have a checkbox here from the form setting, or you can just bring in, the normal way, Command E. Okay, so we have a checkbox. Let's call it checkbox. It's okay. And what I want here is for the checkbox label, let's bring here the text from sports types name. Fantastic. Okay, so now you can see that what we have here is dynamic checkboxes, and each one of these checkboxes has a different category. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start styling them. Let's see how the checkbox is actually structured. We have a checkbox field, that's kind of like a wrapper. Then we have the checkbox, which is actually this element that we can click. And let's go here. This is the checkbox here at the bottom, which we can click. Oh, right now, by the way, we can't click it, I think because we have this overlay on top of it. So we have to make sure, you can see that checkboxes are under this heading image, which is not good for us. So let's go here for the calendar filters, give that a little bit of margin so we have space between them so the image, does not go on top of it. Okay, so you see we have these small checkboxes, which I still can't seem to click. Let's take this whole form block. Let's just, while we're styling it, give it even more, more space. We'll organize this later. I just want to see that I can actually click it. Okay, now you can see that they're clickable. Okay, so we have this checkbox, but if you look at our design, we don't actually have a checkbox. We don't have this check mark and a box. We just have, when you're clicking on this, it gets kind of like a background. However, this actual checkbox is important because this is how Webflow knows what is turned on and off. So the way that we're going to design it is, let's see how it's, again, how it's structured. Has text, a checkbox field, the checkbox itself, and the actual text. Let me go into the checkbox property. And you can see here, actually, if I click this here, it's easier to see. We have the default style, which is what we have right now, but we can also customize this. So if I'm going to click custom here, you can see that now the checkbox actually looks different. And now if I'm going to go into the checkbox itself and going to give this a class, let's call this filter checkbox. Now this thing here has another new state, which is called checked, which is basically, if I'm going to click this, it basically shows me what this looks like after I've clicked on this thing. And this is basically going to help me style these exactly how I want them. So let's go ahead and start styling them. I'm also going to give this a class so that it's easier for me to, we need to give this a class so we can design this as well. It's called this filter checkbox wrapper. Okay, so for the wrapper, in general, let's going to give it a little bit of padding. Let's design the text. Let's give it an outline just so that it looks how we want this to look. So let's start with this. Let's, what does the text looks like? The text is 40. What is 40 divided by 16? It's about 2.5 REM, 2.5 REM. That's quite big. Let me do 2. I'm going to start with 2. Let's set the color to green. I think that this one, what does the text look like? It's just width 75, but it's regular, I guess. So width 75, uppercase, more options, uppercase. Yeah, I think this looks better. Maybe we can do 2.5. Something like this. Okay. Let's give this also green border. So border color green. Okay, we're starting to get there. A little bit more padding, I think. This is okay. What else do we have? We want to give them a little bit of space between them. And I think this is actually going to be managed from the actual collection list. So not the collection item, but the collection list itself, which is a Flexbox. Let's give it a little bit of a gap here. Actually, what I really want is for this thing to take up the whole space, and so they will be kind of like spaced between. So let's go ahead and just make sure that this is size 100% and that actually the collection list wrapper, let's call this calendar. Actually, I don't know if we need to, actually the form maybe needs to, or the form block. We've got so many wrappers here. Okay, so the form block you can see is inside of the Flexbox, the calendar filtering wrapper. Let's set it to expand. Okay, so that's taken up the whole space. That's great. The form itself also taken up the whole space. That's great. Collection list wrapper also takes up the whole space. This is great. So this collection list filtering is just aligning them to the left. Let's try to space them out. Fantastic. This was exactly what I wanted. So made sure that all of the parent wrappers are taken up 100%, and then the actual Flexbox to align them. Looks pretty good. We probably need to have a little bit more spacing here and align these to the center. They're not fully aligned yet, but we're getting there. Probably need to give this calendar filter list a little bit more margin from the top. Yeah. Okay. Let's get back to the checkbox. We still, if we're looking at this, we're still clicking this, and this is how the checkbox looks like. So that's not what we want. So what I actually want is for this checkbox, let's go into the checked selector. I don't need this check, which is actually, you can see a background image. So let me delete that. Now it's getting a blue background. So instead of a blue background, I actually want a purple background. And I don't need borders, so I just need a purple background. It's a little bit hard to see. Let me just do it on a pink so we can see it. And the other thing I want to do when this is selected is I want this to take up the whole space. So you can see right now it's taking up just 12 pixels on 12 pixels. And in general, I want this to be behind the label. So let's turn it into an absolute positioning. We'll turn its parent into relative. So we can set it up to take up the whole space. This one, let's turn it into an absolute. And let's turn this to 100%, 100%. Just fill up the whole thing. For some reason, yeah, it's not aligned because it had -20 on the margin. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. We also need to remove the margin from the top. Okay, fantastic. So that looks good. The background, for some reason, okay. We want this purple background. Great. So, oh, I understand what I did wrong. I changed the filter checkbox, but not on the checked space. Okay, so checked is currently pink. Let's turn that into purple. And the normal one, normal state, we don't want to have any background. So this is great. And we want to make sure that the text itself is on top. So let's select the checkbox label. Let's call this checkbox label. And let's turn that into a relative so we have access to the Z index. Let's put this at 2. I don't know. And now let's give this a try. So now I'm clicking here. Oh, and you can see as I'm clicking, the checkbox is being turned on and we can see the background here. Okay, so this is essentially working and you can see that we can check as many as we want. Okay, so this is great. The last thing I want to do is just make sure that it's positioned properly. So we've got a bunch of things here. Number one, we need to have, for this whole wrapper needs to have a little bit of space from left and right, probably similar to what we have here, so probably like 70 pixels, kind of like a container. Don't remember if we have a container or not. Did we create a container? I don't remember. Let's go into our styles and see if we have container, section heading, contain. With margin right, 70. Yeah, we do have that. So let's see if I can apply that to this. Contain, section header contain. Fantastic. This was exactly what I wanted. Okay, because we've already created that here, so it's a great way to reuse the classes. Okay, already looks good, but for some reason, it's not aligned, and it's not aligned because this H2 has 20 pixels of margin from the top, which I'm not sure that I like. So let me remove this 20 pixels here, and now it's fully aligned. Let's see if it made any change here. No, I don't need this top heading. Okay, looking good. It's probably not responsive yet, but we'll take care of the responsiveness afterwards. Let's give it a little bit of padding from the bottom as well, so it's not, so this filtering, calendar filter wrapper has some space between this and the actual list that we have here. And let's go ahead and continue to bring in the list of events. So this next part also will need a wrapper. So let's add another wrapper to the calendar section, and another div, and we're going to call this calendar event list. That sounds good, right? And this event list, by the way, you can see it has the same margins, so we can reapply this container thing that we had. Let's do the container section header container. Fantastic. That's great. Inside of it, we need to have a collection list of all of the events. So let me add in a collection list and select the events. Fantastic. Now we've got a bunch of them. Wonderful. Okay, the way that we're going to organize them is, in this case, don't mind that they're one on top of the other. That's actually pretty good. Inside the item, I want to have a grid that basically has 3 columns. Column number 1, column number 2, column number 3. And if you remember from our previous video when we worked with grid, I'm going to have to bring in a div to hold the content in each one of the cells. So let's go ahead and do that. If this is collection list item, yep, inside of it, I'm going to bring in a div. So let's bring in a div, and let's call this div. You know what? Actually, I don't have to bring in a div. I wanted to say that I can just turn this collection item into a grid, which I can, but then I thought about something else. I'm thinking whether this whole thing needs to be a link or just this button needs to be a link. I guess just this button needs to be a link, so the whole thing doesn't need to be a link. So we can turn this whole collection item. Let's call this calendar grid item. And then I can just turn that into a grid right here from the display. So this is another case where, I couldn't use a quick stack because I can't change an element into a quick stack. So just another reason why I prefer to use the grid. So now we've got 3 columns, and it's basically 3 columns, but I don't want them to be equal, right? So I want this to be smaller, this to be smaller, and this to be bigger, I can say. And we have this 1 FR, which is basically, maybe I can make this half an FR, this 1 FR, and then this one half. Let's close this so we can see what we're doing. I would say half, and 1 would work well for me. Or maybe 0.25, 0.25, no. This, I think, is good. This is about right. Again, I can fine-tune this if I want to, with the numbers here, but I think as a structure, this looks pretty good. Okay, I also don't need the second row, so I'm going to delete this second row. Okay, we've got the main structure here. We want to bring into this grid 3 divs. So let me bring in 1 div, and then copy, paste. Fantastic. So now I've got places where I can start building my content inside. So let's see what we have here. Number 1 thing we have is a date that is, if I'm not mistaken, this class is called sport name, and then it's also white, so it has combo class. Let's bring in a text element in here. Let's pull in the text from the date. Let's first give this a class of sport type, and we can find it right here. And then text color white, Fantastic. We've got the first column. Second column has sport. It actually has 2 data points, right? Sport name and then sport type. So to have 2 elements and align them one next to another, we're actually going to have to wrap them together in kind of like a flex box. So let's bring in, I can actually, copy and paste this for easier, management. Remove the text white color. So now we've got this, and pull in the sport type. What was it? Sport name. Okay. So that's great. Now copy paste this, and this needs to be the sport type. So you can see we have sports here, and then we have sport type. Okay, fantastic. We need these to be one next to each other. So what I'm going to do is right click, wrap in a horizontal flex. And now I'm going to bring this one inside of this horizontal flex, and now they're one next to each other. We should probably call this, let's call this calendar grid, just so I know where I'm using this event type wrapper. And the reason I'm giving it this class is because now I can go ahead and space them. And I also want to bring in just like text of these 2 dashes. So let me copy and paste this, but not give this a dynamic, text. Just have like a static text that I'm going to do dash dash. Okay, got too much space here. So now we've got sport and then sport type. Now we have to have sport type here, and this is important for later on where I'm going to do the filtering in the next video. But this is just for you to know that if we want to filter these by sport type, we need to have the sport type visible. We'll get into that a little bit more. Okay, name of the event. Let's bring in a text block and get the name of the event. And then we have event name already existed as a style. Fantastic. And last thing, here's a short description. So let's just bring in another text element, another text block, pulling the data from the description. That's great. I also want to, they are too close next to each other. So let's go into the calendar grid item, and let's just give it a little bit of a margin from the bottom, just so that we have a little bit of space between these, events here. So we've got the snowmobiling description, and after that, we need a button that says more info. Actually, I want this to say, we haven't created a component from the last button. So let's go ahead and create a component from this. Although I think it's going to be a problem to use this in a component. I'll show you in a second why. Let's call this button green ghost. Let's go back and bring in this button here. Whoa, we've got lots of events. Let's bring in this green ghost. in here. Okay, so first of all, we need to make sure that the buttons and everything here is aligning to the left. So let me take this div block, which we didn't give a class to. Let's call this event grid cell details, and just turn that into a flex box and align everything to, not horizontally, vertically, but align it to the left. Okay, so that is great. I can also give them a little bit more, not columns, sorry, but I can give the rows a little bit more spacing, which I think is good. Now this button, let's go into the setting. We didn't give it properties, so let's edit the component. Let's turn the text into a property that is editable on instances, button text, and also the link. So let's select the link block, and then the link, we're going to add button link. However, I think we're going to have a problem, and let me see. Okay, so now we can change the button text to maybe view event. View event, that's great. But if I want to link this page, I have a problem here. From this list, I can't choose a dynamic page, which is what we need, because we need this to link to this, the page of this specific event. And that is a problem currently with Webflow's component. Maybe they'll fix that. But I think in this case, I'm going to have to unlink this instance just so that we have a regular button here, because you can see now I have this option, collection page, which is what I want. I want to go to the current event. So I'm unable to use a component for this dynamic button, but that's where we are right now. In this one, we want to bring in an image. So let me bring in an image here, and let me pull the image from the thumb. That is great. I actually don't even need to almost resize this. So we're pretty good. We're pretty good. The last thing that we are missing is these lines. So I'm just going to give each of the event grid items a top line here. So let's go ahead and for the event grid item, let's go into the style and let's give this border, top border, just top border I want. Grin. Okay, not bottom, not right, not left, just top bottom. Okay, just one. And now it's too close, so we need to give this whole grid item a little bit of padding so that we're not too close to the line. And I can go ahead and measure here in Figma. Basically, the spacing should be about 60 pixels. 60 feels like a lot to me. I'm going to do less than 60. It feels a lot. I'm going to do it this way. But then I also want to make sure that the space that I have here and the space between the next cell are similar. So if this is 40, I would do 40 here as well. Whoa, not here. It's going to be fun turning this into a responsive element down the line. Okay, this feels good. This feels good. We've got the element. We've got the grid of all of the events we've got. We've got lots of events here. And then in the next video, we're going to dynamically filter them with the FinSuite CMS filtering. See you in the next video.